Good afternoon, friends, and thank you very much for being here this afternoon. Since we hadn't met for quite some time in this format, I thought it would be useful to have a usual interaction that we've had. So I will begin with, as usual, with an announcement that I have to make, following which you are free to ask me questions on that and subsequently on anything else that you would like. The norm will stay as it is. Please choose your questions correctly. It will be only one question per person. With that, let me make that announcement, and that this relates to the visit of the External Affairs Minister, Shri Salman Khurshid, to Norway. Even as we speak, the External Affairs Minister, Shri Salman Khurshid, is traveling to Norway. He will be there from the 11th, that is today, till the 13th. His visit perhaps focuses on three elements. Of course, number one is his bilateral meetings with his counterpart, Foreign Minister Eide. Also, he will meet senior officials in the Norwegian government, including Prime Minister Stoltenberg. This meeting will take place on the 13th. Of perhaps more interest to you is that following our membership of the Arctic Council, Foreign Minister Eide has invited Mr. Khurshid to visit Tromsø, which is the place where the Fram Center for Environment and Climate is located. This is a Norwegian center where it's located, and he will actually fly with Mr. Khurshid today to Tromsø. Subsequently, tomorrow, both Mr. Khurshid and the Foreign Minister will also go to Svalbard. Svalbard, as you are aware, is the archipelago where India's research station Himadri is located. And right now we have 4 scientists working at the research station. Those of you who've been following it are aware that it was initiated in 2007 and inaugurated in 2008. Subsequently, we spent about $3 million on our research activities related to that center, and we intend to enhance this, and during the next 5 years, an amount of about $12 million is expected to be spent on research through this center. Right now, there have been about 170 Indian scientists who've written on this matter, and there are 18 Indian institutions who are focused on research related to climate through the Arctic. The idea of this entire information is that we are extremely interested in the Arctic region and intend to play an active role in the Arctic Council too. And that's the second area of focus of the External Affairs Minister while he is in Norway. The third one is related to investments. As you are perhaps aware, Norway has amongst the richest sovereign wealth funds. This is a government pension fund. It has about 700 billion dollars at its disposal. And in April earlier this year, we had officials from the Sovereign Wealth Fund visit India. They had discussions with senior officials, including the Deputy Chairperson of the Planning Commission and the Finance Minister. And the External Affairs Minister intends to take these discussions forward and to see how we can facilitate greater investments into India, including in the infrastructure sector, through the Sovereign Wealth Fund that Norway has. So broadly, these are the three major issues in the External Affairs Minister's visit to Norway. I think with that I will stop, and if you have any questions, we could begin with questions relating to the announcement, and then if you have any other questions, I am willing to answer that. So the questions relating to Norway. Nas?
Yeah, actually, I'd like to know, besides climate, what are the other areas of focus, other areas on which this research is focusing? Arctic.
I would suggest, we have detailed information available, and we will pass it on to you on various aspects of glaciology, climate change, environment, that this research is being coordinated by not only one department in India. While it's being coordinated by one department, there are other departments too, including the Earth Sciences Department, which are focused on this. And I will pass those information, which are largely of a scientific nature, but I will provide them to you at the end of this briefing, if that is what you want to know. Yes, sir, Ashok. Just hold on.
Can you brief us about India's contribution to the seed bank in Svalbard?
I must confess that I'm not a scientist, and I am aware of only the diplomatic dimensions of this. But if you would require any further information, I would suggest that you deal with the concerned departments, because these are directly handled by those departments, whether it is science and technology or whether it is earth sciences. But I would just suffice here to say that our interest in Svalbard region dates back to prior to independence, because the Treaty of Svalbard was signed in 1920, and we acceded to this in 1923. And this provides us, we are among the 10 countries who have the opportunity to set up stations there, and we are amongst the limited number of countries who are original signatories to the Treaty of Svalbard. But I'm afraid I don't have details of the exact investment that we have in Svalbard. Please. Yes?
Explain this 1920.
I thought the date could be as evident as possible. 1920 would mean British India, but at that time too, as you would perhaps recollect, that even with the United Nations we are an original member even prior to independence. So it was the norm there that if a dominion was interested in any activity, it could accede to a treaty, and that was what we had done way back in 1923 as regards the Arctic, and as regards the United Nations in 1945. Yes, sir. Rishi.
Sir, any discussion on enhanced cooperation on the oil and gas sector with Norway? And also on a related note, any discussion on India's role in the Arctic Council with Norway?
Yes, on the oil and gas sector, yes, because we see this as a possible area of growth between India and Norway. Perhaps you are aware that Norway is the third largest exporter of oil after Saudi Arabia and Russia. Also, it has expertise in deep sea oil extraction. So there will be areas of cooperation, and that we could learn from Norway some of the best practices that they adopt in that area. And what was your subsequent?
The Arctic Council.
Well, India's role in the Arctic Council is laid down as an observer. There are clear norms of what observers can do. They participate in the subgroups where much of the work is done. At this stage, that is what is provided for in the Arctic Council. We are grateful to Norway for having supported our membership there. But at this stage, we will take it in terms of our scientific and technological interest in the Arctic region. That was the basis for our request for observership, and which we are grateful has been accepted by the Arctic Council. Yes, Ashwini.
So I just wanted to check with you. You mentioned that the fund team had come down in April,
Correct.
and they were interested in infrastructure. Are there any
I
projects?
think I didn't say what you're saying, but please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Are there any projects that have been identified as such?
Let me tell you that there were officials of the fund did come here in April. They had discussions, I said, with the Planning Commission and with the Finance Ministry. I then said they are investing in Indian companies, several of them, but they have not yet invested in infrastructure. It is our hope that as they expand their portfolio for investment in India, even infrastructure would be one of those areas. Anyone else on this? Well, then it's free for all. Let's begin with anything else that you would need to ask. So let's go by issue. Since Maha has raised her hand first.
Sir,
Yes, ma'am.
this is with regards to reports that 2 Indian aircrafts violated the Pakistan airspace. Can we have any details if Pakistan has complained to India about it, or what was the real picture?
I don't know what the picture is because, there are, as far as I am involved, these are only related at the diplomatic level. As of today, as of now, as I speak to you, I just rechecked, we have not heard any information on what you are saying at the diplomatic level. Yes.
So Nepal's former Prime Minister is here. He was here and he is today also. He has made Prime Minister and External Affairs Minister also. Can you throw some light on the conversation that has gone?
I think we've been through this before. Please don't expect me to be a fly on the wall. Having said that, I can certainly say that this is part of our engagement with all stakeholders in Nepal. As you are aware, there have been other leaders of other political parties in India, and our idea is to understand from them, is there anything that we in India could do to assist? As far as we are concerned, we would be ready to help Nepal at a pace and in the way that the Nepalese government would want. And therefore, it's part of our engagement with different segments of Nepali society on this. And he's had very constructive discussions, as has had previous visitors to India. No? Yes, Maria.
The special envoy Staffan de Mistura is in town. There is any development?
Yes, the special envoy of the Italian government, Mr. Stefan de Mistura, reached Delhi yesterday. And in preparation for your presence here today, I did ask the External Affairs Minister that prior to his departure late last night, he did meet Mr. de Mistura. And they had a discussion. Of course, as you are aware, this discussion was related to the desire of the Italian government to have a speedy trial for the two Marines, and the External Affairs Minister was apprised of the view of the Italian government on this since their last meeting, and he has explained the situation based on his understanding of where the judicial process is. Yes, sir.
So how you're looking Saudi Arabia's move to decrease Hajj quota by 20%, and how India is going to take up this issue with Saudi?
Can you please repeat?
Actually, Saudi Arabia has informed all foreign countries that they are going to decrease 20% Hajj quota this year. So how India is going to take up this issue?
As you are aware, we have a regular dialogue with Saudi Arabia on Hajj matters. This is an appropriate situation that will be discussed during that dialogue. I do not know the details of what you are mentioning, but it has always been our view that there is a growth in terms of a number of Indians wanting to undertake the Hajj pilgrimage, and the Saudi authorities have generally been very accommodating of our needs. Sorry. And even when the last quota was fixed, we had then indicated that we would require a slightly larger number, and the Saudi authorities had indicated that at the end of their consultations with everybody, they will address this issue, because it depends on how globally the number of pilgrims who are coming would, their understanding of what would be the total number of pilgrims that are coming. So at this stage, we will only be able to take it up through the mechanism that I have suggested, but I will have a look on whether does this have an impact on Indian pilgrims that we have agreed to as of now. Yes, Shailendra.
Sir, there were reports of some Indians being detained.
Yes.
Yeah, some Indians being detained in Kuwait. Can we have a status on that, whether they have been released or not?
Yes, I think you have been following that case previously, and let me try and explain to you the situation in Kuwait. We have currently approximately 700,000 Indian nationals who are resident in Kuwait. These are in various categories. Now, since the beginning of this year, the Kuwaiti government has announced a policy whereby they would try and reduce the number of expatriates in general over a 10-year period. And part of that approach, they have initially focused on those who do not have valid visas, and also those who have come on a certain type of visa, that is a domestic workers visa, and are working in other areas. Because in Kuwait, there are broadly two types of visas. One is if you work for domestic as domestic assistants, and then another type of visa where you work in other organizations, etc. Now, there is a feeling that there may be large number of expatriates, Indians included, who may be coming through to Kuwait in one category and perhaps working in another category. And those are the ones which have been targeted. Now, my understanding is that we have taken it up with Kuwait, both in New Delhi and in Kuwait, that if this is their policy, it is best to communicate this and provide a time frame for everybody who is not in compliance with this to either sort their status out or to return to their home countries. Now, this is for all expatriates. It's not, again, not targeted towards Indians alone. Of course, Indians are amongst the largest number of expatriates outside in Kuwait. As I said, it's approximately 700,000. So there are likely to be a number of Indians. At this stage, the number is fairly small. My understanding from the beginning of the year till now, we have issued less than 1,000 emergency certificates for Indians wanting to return to India. Of these, not all have returned, because by the time some of them desire to return, they are able to regularize their status. So that's where we are. The numbers are small, but this is an issue. Our embassy has been proactively following this up. Now, the Kuwaiti government has decided that they would pay for the air ticket for those who are to return. But they are being only paid for the air ticket up to the nearest destination, which is Mumbai. So as part of a welfare measure, the embassy is working with the local authorities, and the excess amount, that is somebody would travel from, say, Mumbai to Delhi or to Rajasthan. That excess amount of airfare is being paid through the embassy, through the Indian Workers' Welfare Fund. In addition, we have also our labor officials are regularly going to the deportation centers to try and assist any Indian nationals who may have a willingness to change over their papers rather than go back. That's where we are. These are sporadic occasions which, when there are some raids or something in certain areas where there are large number of expatriates, including Indians, who may be involved, and we respond to that. Yes, Gautam.
Yes, this is regarding one BCIM meeting held at Kunming. There is a report in Indian Hindu that India was not represented in that meeting. Is there any specific reason for that? Because the meeting was held just after the Premier Lee's visit, where a joint statement was issued.
I must confess I have no readout on that. This is the first time I'm hearing about it, and I will have a look and we will provide a response since you've raised that question. Could you tell me the date when it was held?
I think it's the last week.
Last week.
Exact
Are you
date.
saying it's the... Well, I think what you're saying is what she is referring to. It's the Shangri-La dialogue rather than a BCIM meeting that you are saying. There are two separate issues in this, but perhaps, pardon? I think all of you need to get your facts right. Whether it's a trade expo, it's a Shangri-La dialogue, or it's a BCIM meeting. I think I will try and find out factual information on this, and we will try and respond to it. Anyone else? Just before you answer, if anyone else would like to ask any other question on any other thing. Just a minute. So, yes, Ranjana.
Yeah, so on July 3, the Saudi Arabia 3-month grace period is expiring for the Nitakat, those affected by Nitakat. So where do the Indian expatriates stand? How many are affected? How many would be coming back? And what were the talks? I mean, our EAM went there, other ministers also went there. So where do we stand? Thanks.
Thank you very much. Today is Gulf session, I think. But I think you have a valid question. Let me try and put out what we have. As you perhaps are aware, there are a total of 2.8 million Indians in Saudi Arabia. Now, since this issue of the possibility of expatriates who are not in compliance with their visa status being returned to India arose earlier this year, we have followed a rather proactive approach. We've tried to tackle it at various levels. One is at the political level, where we had our Minister of Overseas Indian Affairs visit along with a delegation of the Minister of State for External Affairs and the advisor to the Prime Minister. That is Mr. Vailar Ravi, who was the Minister of Overseas Indian Affairs, accompanied by Mr. E. Ahmed and Mr. Nair from the Prime Minister's office. Now, they went there and had detailed discussions with the Labour Ministry, and the idea was that we acknowledge that it is the sovereign right of a country to have a policy that they determine appropriate for residency in their country. However, what we felt was that since there was a change from the policy which existed so far, the idea was to provide time and to treat those who are adversely impacted by that policy with a degree of humaneness and dignity. And that was the focus of our political contacts. This was reinforced when the External Affairs Minister went to Saudi Arabia. He did meet his counterpart, Prince Saud Al Faisal, but he also met the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, as well as virtually a series of senior Saudi officials. And in each of those engagements, it was emphasized that this was not something that was targeted towards Indians. They did have lots of praise for the Indian community there. There was an acknowledgement that it was a preferred community as far as Saudi Arabia was concerned, and there was no attempt at targeting one or the other community. But to follow a policy which would we would ensure that there were some those who were irregularly there would have to leave the country. Now, since then, the second level at which we've been functioning is at the grassroots level, where our embassy and our consulate are taking a very, very proactive view. What we've done is, while we have only embassy in Riyadh and a consulate in Jeddah, the ambassador did open up a special office of a temporary nature in Dammam, which is in the eastern province, which is about 400 kilometers away from Riyadh. We have a regular officer stationed there to assist all Indian nationals. In addition, there are several Indian community schools which are spread out all over Saudi Arabia. And these are at distances varying from 600 kilometers to more than 1,000 kilometers from Riyadh or Jeddah. Now, each of these schools have where their non-teaching staff are assisting Indian nationals by collecting their applications for either change of their status or for emergency certificates. In this process, over this last few months, I understand approximately 72,000 applications have been received. These applications are, as I said, either for grant of emergency certificates or their willingness to find new jobs and to move on to perhaps other employers. Now, the embassy has been able to identify 150 Saudi employers who are willing to take Indian employees. Now, these are in various categories. The lists are, the names of these employers have been displayed and communicated to all these centers that where we are collecting information about people wanting to go back. So these 70,000 people who applied to either change the status or to return to India have been informed of what are the opportunities available for them to find alternate employment. We are also set up a 24/7 help desk whereby anytime anybody can phone and seek information not only in English or Hindi but in several Indian languages. A third way that we've been proactive is that approximately 600 volunteers have volunteered to provide assistance to the Indian community. Now, these volunteers with embassy officials are stationed on a 24/7 basis at the deportation centers in Riyadh and in the eastern province in Dammam, as well as the airports. So any Indian wishing to travel back to India having problems at the airport is being assisted. At this stage, we do not know the total number of people who may return because of this, because the last time when we had this sort of a situation of an amnesty where people were asked to return, we had provided about 30,000 emergency certificates. However, it is estimated that only about 3,000 people came back. So at this stage, I can't tell you exact numbers, etc., of how many people may want to come back, but I can only give you an understanding of how many have applied, what is the past practice, and what the situation is. We are also in touch with the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs and through them with various state governments to try and ensure if there can be some assistance or facilitation at this end. Because if there are people in certain significant numbers coming from various states, it devolves on those states to provide opportunities for settlement for those people. So we are in touch with the various state governments involved in this venture and through the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs. Also, the Ministry of Overseas Indian Affairs and Air India and the state governments, we've shared the databases and list of people who have applied for the emergency certificates so that they are aware of the dimensions of this issue, and should there be requirement for additional flights or for assistance at the airports or in the places where they stay, they are all well aware. So basically, I mean, I'd like to just try and sum up by saying that we've done our best, we've worked proactively, and we hope that you have not seen this crisis burgeon into a major issue simply because the embassy and the Ministry of External Affairs, along with other ministries, is trying to do our best to ameliorate what is a difficult situation which has arisen there. Yes, Rishi.
There was another ceasefire violation in the Poonch district along the LOC this morning. This makes it the second in the last 2 weeks. Are we taking it up diplomatically?
Between India and Pakistan, there are several avenues for responding to such issues. You referred to this as a second instance, and as with the first, at this stage, there has not been a diplomatic requirement because this is assessed by the authorities on the field of what is the best way that they feel this can be addressed. And so diplomatic redressal or response is one area, but there are other mechanisms which exist, and perhaps other mechanisms are being used, and I would not be the right person to respond to those other mechanisms because they are handled separately. There has not been a need that has been raised by those people who are in authority there to take this up at a diplomatic level. Another one? I don't have anything further on that, but
just a follow-up. This is the 5th meeting in 3 months. So, do you think that it's normal? Can you elaborate a little bit more? I know that the desire of the speed trial it was reiterated, but what kind of diplomacy is this? So, with this.
Mario, you've lived in India long enough to understand that a judicial process has its own speed. It has its own manner of proceeding with. And so, as you are aware, this is ultimately, the outcome will be determined by, in a case which is sui generis. We acknowledge that this is a case which has not happened previously, and it's a case which is new both to India and to Italy. And as two friendly countries, we can only work together and try and see in a sui generis manner, in a sui generis case which has no precedent, we try and work our systems in a manner which is acceptable to both. And that's what we are doing. The executive in India has a limited role in terms of judicial outcomes, except to make the case in front of the judiciary. We're trying to do that. We're trying to do this as quickly as possible, and both India and Italy, we have repeated this commitment that the idea is to ensure that this matter is expeditiously resolved, because we do not want this to be a major issue between two countries which enjoy otherwise excellent relations. Yes, sir.
The NSA revelation that India is the most elected country over February alone, in terms of something like 6.3 billion reports from the American. Has there been any communication with the American government, any concern about the that?
Yeah. If you want to ask me whether we are concerned by media disclosures suggesting that data relating to private communications of Indian citizens may have been harvested, my answer to you is yes, we are concerned and surprised about it. Now, between India and the US, we have a cyber security dialogue, and it is coordinated by the national security councils on both the sides. And we feel that this is the appropriate fora to discuss such issues. We intend to seek information and details during consultations between interlocutors from both sides on this matter in that appropriate forum. Now, if you ask that if it is discovered that Indian laws have been violated, Indian laws relating to privacy of information have been violated, what would be the view of the Indian government? Obviously, we would find it unacceptable if Indian laws relating to privacy of information of Indian ordinary citizens have been violated. Surely, we would find it unacceptable. I hope broadly I have tried to respond to you on where we stand. Of course, this is an evolving situation. Every day we find new issues coming up, we will take it, rather than jump to conclusions at this stage, we will take it as it evolves and have a better understanding and a clearer paradigm of how to tackle this issue once the broader parameters of this in its entirety are available for us. Thank you very much.